Hello and welcome to our third lesson in a Christmas Carol GCSE revision series. If you're sitting the exams this year, next year, the year after, and you're just trying to get a bit of a head start, some of the key quotes, tips, tricks to be able to do the best you can in the essay writing for the Christmas Carol portion of your GCSEs, you've come to the right place. First week, we looked at Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, kind of obvious, biggest character in the entire novella. Did a character analysis, key quotes, model answer for him. If you haven't seen that video from lesson one, I highly recommend. Last week we went through the ghosts. This week we're going to go through the Cratchits, Bob Cratchit, his wife Martha, Tiny Tim, etc., etc. We're then going to go through Fred next week and then dive into some themes afterwards. So anyone who's watched any of these videos so far, you'll know the format by now. Pretty much we start by looking at the character and what they're, or characters and what they're about. And then we move into some key quotes and then we do a model answer towards the end, model paragraph. So the model paragraph we'll do later in this episode will basically be the significance of the Cratchits in the novel. So we'll be hang tight for that in a little while. Okay, so the Cratchit family, they represent poverty and the working class. That's probably the biggest thing that they represent. Now, tying that into context, Charles Dickens was born into a relatively wealthy, sort of more middle-class family. He had education, all of that good stuff. He then moved into the working class because of the fact that he, pardon me, because of the fact that he, his father went into debtor's prison. So that's a big problem. And so he was then in a boot blackening factory. So he understood all about poverty in the working class. And I think that that's why in a lot of his novels, not just in A Christmas Carol, but in a lot of his other work like Oliver Twist and things like that, he really presents the working class as being very noble and good. So that's quite interesting. First thing that they represent. And Bob obviously is the worker of Scrooge as well. And Scrooge's transformation is slightly shown through the Cratchits and particularly Bob, because at the beginning he treats Bob really badly, and by the end he obviously treats Bob far better. It also, the play in the novel, the Cratchits represent morality and resilience. So even though they're very poor, they make the best of what they have. Bob in particular doesn't complain about what little he has. He's grateful for what he does have. And that also then links to fairly noble representation of Christianity. So there are a couple of references to the Cratchits being Christians. Bob and Tiny Tim go to church. Obviously, they're celebrating Christmas. You don't have to be Christian to celebrate Christmas, but in Victorian England, particularly, the majority of people would have been Christian. So they represent Christianity, and I suppose you could say the Christmas miracle, Christmas miracles. The Cratchits are also what we could consider dynamic, possibly protagonists or certainly deuteragonists. So they probably are more deuteragonists, actually. They're sort of secondary characters in the novella. The protagonist ultimately is Scrooge, so I'm going to change that. But they're dynamic in the sense that they go from, based on their experiences, they change the way that they look at the world. So that's the Cratchits in a nutshell. Let's just dive now into some of, let's dive into some of the key quotes. If I'm a bit tired, I apologize. I actually adopted a couple of Great Danes last night, so I have not slept very much. So if I look a bit disheveled and a little bit stuttery compared to normal, I apologize. I'll be back to my usual self tomorrow, hopefully. Also had a bit of sleep, if the puppies let me sleep. Anyway, so the Cratchit family. Mr. Scrooge, said Bob. I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. So Bob calls Scrooge the founder of the feast. Now this shows Bob's extreme gratitude and resilience, because, you know, Bob is not treated well by Scrooge at all. He's treated pretty badly, actually. And yet they're eating this very humble Christmas dinner where they've had to stretch out every single ingredient to the max in order for everyone to be fed. But he still shows gratitude to his boss. It says, he's the founder of the feast. You know, he still pays my salary. And so, you know, but Mrs. Cratchit is unhappy with Scrooge. And we can understand why, because he treats Bob really badly. So she says, founder of the feast indeed. And she's even reddening. So her face, she's getting frustrated and angry. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it. So, you know, this is a clever play on words. It's also imagery. It shows the frustration of Martha Cratchit because she feels that Scrooge doesn't treat Bob as well as he deserves to be treated. But Bob is still resilient. He says, you know, Martha, it's Christmas. And he, you know, he defends Scrooge, even though Scrooge really doesn't deserve defending. He is a bad man. He at the beginning of the play, of the novel. I always call it a play. I'm sorry, it's a novel. Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us. Again, just shows their resilience. It's very heartwarming, and it links to the Christian nation of Victorian England as well. So the idea of God bless us, you know, we still say that, like if someone sneezes, quite often we'll say God bless you, things like that. But at that point, God bless us was much more weighted by like the fact that most people in England were Christian. So, you know, God bless us really was strongly meant to link to that idea of God, actually, please bless us, bless our family. So again, cool quote about resilience of the Cratchits would be very endearing to the Victorian audience that would have been watching this. Sitting by himself so much and thinks the strange, so Tim sitting by himself so much, I should put here, thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. So this is again a Bible reference. Obviously, it is a Christmas carol after all, so there's lots of Christian references in here, especially around Christmas. But the fact that Tiny Tim, this poor little boy who is crippled, as in, you know, disabled, has disabilities and illness, he wants to use his condition to give hope to other people. He wants other people to feel better because of him. So this generates a huge amount of pathos. And we really admire Tiny Tim for the fact that he suffers this horrible illness and yet he doesn't let it affect him. As a matter of fact, he wants to use it for good as best he can. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. And again, it just shows it's such a positive light on the working class and the fact that they're so resilient and kind and generous, even though they have so little in Victorian England. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December, said Scrooge, buttoning his great coat to the chin. So whilst we've got the resilience of the Cratchits and making best of everything, Scrooge, this is from stave 1, is moaning about the fact that Bob wants to take Christmas Day off. So Scrooge doesn't even want to give Bob Christmas Day off to celebrate. Now, remember, at this time in history, there were no workers' rights. So technically, the business owners, if they wanted, could enforce that the workers would have to work even on Christmas Day. There wasn't, you know, any sort of worker rights, any minimum payments, any benefits, any security for workers. It was literally whatever your boss will give you is what you get. So technically, Scrooge doesn't even have to give Bob Christmas Day off, but he does. But he gives Bob a lot of grief about it, and sort of says, "Oh, you're picking my pocket," as if Bob is sort of stealing from Scrooge for the fact that he dares to want to celebrate Christmas. So again, this just shows, as I said to you earlier, Scrooge is often, his transformation is actually shown through the Cratchit family. And this is one way that that's shown, especially as we go into the more transformative quotes, like in Act 5, Stave 5, Scrooge buys the biggest turkey, obviously, right? And he gets it sent to Bob Cratchit, not Bon Cratchit's, Bob Cratchit's house. And he's like rubbing his hands and laughing. So he's fully transformed into this generous person, much better boss. So you've got the imagery of the turkey and the juxtaposition between Scrooge at the beginning and Scrooge now. so much more generous now. And it's also the conditions, like I said. So he doesn't have to give Bob the day off, but he also doesn't even have to give Bob any health and safety, anything like that in the workplace. So Bob at the beginning is trying to warm himself at the candle, and he also wears a giant comforter. So these are two different quotes, but both of them show the lack of comfort and safety that working class had, workers generally, but particularly working class had at the time in Victorian England. So just imagine that. Imagine going to work and you're so freezing cold that you have to try and warm your hands on one little pathetic candle because your boss hasn't given you any coal or fire or heating. Now, this is before central heating, so it's not fully Scrooge's fault for that, but he doesn't even let Bob have a fire burning. The only fire that he gets is like one tiny little coal. Yeah. And well, that's the next quote. At the end, Scrooge is like, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle. So an entire bucket full of coal before you dot another I. So again, this just shows the change in Scrooge's attitude. He's gone from giving him the smallest fire imaginable, and he has to wear this giant comforter over him, Bob, all day. And that kind of makes Bob more endearing as well, because then there's the imagery of Bob going out from work and he's going up and down the hills of Camden, celebrating Christmas. And he's in this huge giant comforter. Imagine a guy walking around with this huge duvet over their shoulders because they can't afford a coat and they don't have any other way of staying warm. It's a very endearing image, like I said. Well, it's only once a year, sir, pleaded Bob. So I think this is from two different places as well, but they link together, obviously. So Bob is respectful of Scrooge, but does ask for a little bit of, sympathy and goodwill. Now Bob knows that Scrooge is not a very generous man, and so he literally pleads. He doesn't argue. He asks, "Please let me have Christmas off. Please let me have this." Right, changing gears for a minute. We've got the Tiny Tim quotes. So there are several. Like we did a Tiny Tim quote earlier. Obviously, we've got the extreme repetition here. "My little child," cried Bob. "My little child." As I've pasted these in, I haven't done a very good job of the capitals, so I apologize for that. But the repetition, pardon me, and I think there's some exclamatory and also short sentences, yeah, emphasize the drama and tragedy of Tiny Tim dying. Now, obviously, the other way that the transformation is shown is that Scrooge comes to love Tiny Tim. He's endeared to the boy. He realizes that the boy is he's not a surplus population like Scrooge was saying at the beginning. He's a good kid and he deserves a good life. So in the Ghost of Christmas future, when we see Tiny Tim has died, Scrooge is distraught. And the other way that it's shown, obviously, is through Bob. So Bob is also crying, and he's so upset about the fact that his little boy has died. And obviously, it just breaks our heart, because we know that part of the reason why he is sick or sicker and dying is because Bob hasn't been paid enough money or given enough resources to really look after his son, which is just hideous. So we have this horrible situation where we see Bob crying his eyes out because Tiny Tim is dead. And as the audience, as the reader, we also get a bit choked up, I think, because it's just such a horrible thing to happen. And then Tiny Tim gets the last laugh or last thing here after the transformation has happened. Tiny Tim said, and this is the final line of the entire novella, says, "God bless us, everyone." So this is then just denoting the Christmas miracle and the transformation of Scrooge. The fact that Tiny Tim is even still alive to say this because of the transformation is really uplifting and heartwarming for the reader. One section that I didn't get many quotes for you on, which I would recommend though, is you could look at the section to do with the Christmas meal. I didn't think I'd have time to go through that with you. I probably actually would have had time for one or two quotes, so I apologize for that. I thought I already had too many. But you've got you can look this up. It's all in stave 3. It's, one of the words is the cheapness of the meal was of universal admiration. So the fact that Mrs. Cratchit, Martha, is able to create a very cheap, big, filling meal for her entire family on a huge budget, again, just shows the ingenious nature, the resilience, basically we admire, I suppose, the working class because of the fact that they're able to stretch their budget. Another one that links to that, still in stave 3, talks about how she was brave in ribbons. So the fact that Mrs. Cratchit is in ribbons and they're a cheap way of making her look nicer for Christmas Day, again, probably a few pennies to get a little bit of decoration on her to just, celebrate Christmas without spending much. Again, it just shows the word I was trying to remember in my sleep-deprived brain, resourcefulness. It shows the resourcefulness and adaptability of the working class as well. So, they don't complain, they keep calm, carry on, they get on with it. They're very, very admirable for that reason. Okay, cool. So let's go on to a model paragraph to finish. So we're going to think about the significance of the Cratchits in the novel. At the very beginning, I spoke to you about a few things that they represent and a few things of their significance. One that I'm actually going to do is a bonus one, I suppose you might say, help to show the transformation of Scrooge. I'm actually going to do that one. So, one of the ways in which the Cratchits are particularly significant to A Christmas Carol is through the way that they are used as a vehicle to show the transformation of Scrooge. In stave 1, Bob has to wear an enormous comforter, giant comforter, I think is the exact phrase, in order to stay warm. Scrooge will not allow him to have a fire, an appropriate fire to warm him. The imagery of a man walking around in a comforter is both comical but also tragic, and shows Scrooge's meanness and cheapness. However, later in stave 5, when Scrooge remarks, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I. Shows a complete transformation, and the imagery or symbolism of the fire combined with the motif of the coal, which at first was used negatively but now is used positively, helps to show Scrooge's transformation and endears us further to the Cratchits, since we know that Bob never complained about the poorness of his conditions, and that makes us want him to have a better life even more. This is significant because Dickens saw both the more comfortable life of the middle class and the hard life of the working class. So the transformation of Scrooge was Dickens' attempt to convince business owners to be better to their workers at a time when there was little to no law to protect workers or give them health and safety measures. Okay, so there's a little model for you on the Cratchits. That's an unusual one, talking about how the Cratchits are used to show transformation. The other ones, as I said, you could talk about how they represent the working class, how they represent resilience, how they represent Christians, hard workers, etc., etc. But there you go. That is that for today. So if you like the video, please give it a like. If you have any questions or comments, please comment below. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.